If you're a parent of a child with ADHD, I'm sure you've wondered if there are things you can be doing with your nutrition to help their focus, their attention, and just helping them get through the day a little easier. I'm Dawn, I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm going to answer some of the most common questions I get from parents and some strategies that can help. So let's be honest, feeding any child can be tricky at the best of times. You throw in a child with ADHD and it gets complicated real fast. So the first thing I want to say is that there is no special diet that will fix ADHD. And I think that's important to say because that is not something that we're able to do. But we absolutely can find strategies in their nutrition that can help them to cope better and to focus throughout the day. One of the biggest things I do work on with parents is getting those regular meals and snacks because we know when kids go too long without fuel, their brains are underfed and undernourished. And it's really hard for them to focus, pay attention, regulate their emotions. So that's a big part of the equation. And so what we want to do is focus on, are they getting enough calories? Are they getting enough nutrients? Are they getting enough protein? And that's where we start. So when it comes to school lunches, the first thing I say is keep it simple. It doesn't have to be Pinterest perfect. We just want to make sure that we're getting them the building blocks they need to get through their day. So ideally, some sort of carbohydrate, a grain, some protein, and it would be nice to have some fruit and vegetables in there, and then also a fun food that they enjoy. I think it's really important that we focus on including kids in the decision around their lunch because what we know is if they don't like it, they're not going to eat it. And a perfectly balanced lunch that comes home uneaten is not as good as a maybe less perfect lunch that is actually getting eaten. So again, this is where we really want to focus on making sure that they are eating. The other thing to keep in mind is that it needs to be easy and quick because, first of all, lunches are often short. There's lots of distractions. Um, and sometimes, if it takes too much time to eat it, or if it's complicated, or the wrapper is too hard to open, that could interfere with their ability to eat. So, we want to make sure that we make it as simple and easy as possible for these kids. The last thing that I always think about is, again, when you're thinking about including them in the decision making, if there's a food that they love, but you think maybe isn't as nutritious as it could be, think about what you could add to that to get more nutrition in. So if they love crackers and that's the only type of carbohydrate they want to have, what could we add to that to get more protein? Could we add some cheese? Could we add some meat? Could we add something else to it? So I call this nutrition by addition. So instead of focusing on what we shouldn't have, we look at how can we add things to make it a little bit more balanced. So if your child isn't eating their lunch and coming home with full lunch kits, first of all, you are not alone. The struggle is real. Many of us have faced this and it is super frustrating. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I often say, let's get curious, right? Why aren't they eating their lunch? I think it's easy for us to assume that we know why they're not eating, but sometimes it's not obvious. And sometimes it is something like what I've already mentioned around maybe the package was really hard to open, or they couldn't open the thermos, or they just didn't have enough time. So I often like to start with curiosity and getting their input. Um, and then the other thing that I would look at is what could we do to, if they're not getting enough of those foods that they need, again, include whatever foods you can that are easy, quick, go and get eaten. But some kids, their appetite is so low that they really will struggle. And with those kids, we focus on getting a really good breakfast and then having a really solid after school snack. So we're trying to kind of make up for those nutrients that we're going to be missing during the day. And then whatever we can get them to have during the day, just to get some fuel in their brains, that's the goal. So again, flexibility is the key here. So we really need to be looking at what are some different ways that maybe don't look like what you would assume is what you're supposed to be doing, but we want to get them fed. So parents often ask me if there are certain foods that your child with ADHD should or shouldn't be eating. And so first of all, I want to say there is no magic diet for ADHD again, and it is not one size fits all. So every family is different, and we really do have to look at tailoring it to you and your child. But there are some general patterns that we know can be helpful. So eating consistently. So the goal is typically around every 3 to 4 hours, getting some sort of fuel in every 3 to 4 hours. And then the second thing that I really like to focus on is protein, because we know protein is really important for giving that filling factor and keeping them full longer, but it also is a precursor to the neurotransmitters in our brain that help us with focus and emotional regulation. The third thing I look at is overall balance. And one of the things that the research does show is that kids that actually eat more fruits and vegetables and fish do tend to have better attention than children that eat less. So that is another place that we can focus. But again, we're not looking at any specific magical diet or necessarily needing to eliminate or restrict some of the fun foods or the treats, because those are part of a healthy relationship with food and joyful living. So we want to include all different types of food and just find a way to get them that consistent fuel that they need.